In 2008, the National Watch and Clock Museum in Columbia, Pennsylvania, hosted an exhibit of presidential timepieces called Time in Office. The museum brought together over 30 objects from 22 different presidents. Many of the watches and clocks on exhibit have never been seen before and are usually in storage at their home museums. This is an opportunity for you, our member of the NAWCC, to see this exhibit up close. The first gallery in the exhibit is composed of timepieces from our earliest founding fathers. Our very first case holds 2 pocket watches owned and used by President George Washington. The first one that you see is the pocket watch that George Washington carried while president. Governor Morris purchased this watch for Washington in April 1789 from the shop of Jean-Antoine Lepin, clockmaker to Louis XVI. Washington specifically asked for a watch that is not finically ornamented. This is a very functional, straightforward watch, but still the finest of its day. The back of President Washington's watch is engraved with the watchmaker's name, as well as the serial number that Lepin attributed before it was sent to market.
Close-ups of the dial and notes some of the things on here. First off, you can see the minute hand has been replaced. The hour hand does look original. Okay, there doesn't appear to be any dial feet or pins, but what it looks like are you have some screws, and probably the posts go down through here. So we'll remove one of these screws, and okay, over here. This is interesting. First time this has been on in a lot of years. This is actually the dial mark, and HM is the maker of the dial. I assume we can probably trace that down a little bit. 522. Now we can look at the movement and see if there is a number. I don't remember if there was, but a lot of the times we had the movement numbers would be the same as the dial. That would show that the dial is the same. Now the problem with this watch, here's your quarter repeating mechanism. This actually has been broken here. This is the center wheel, actually, the post, the cannon pinion, and the repeater has been broken at some time. Everything else looks to be complete. There doesn't appear to be any rust. Everything, as far as I can see, at first look, looks complete. This is your quarter repeater snail. It actually tells the watch what quarter it is. And here's your gongs. That's what we sign the time right here. And this is what's called a dumb repeater, because repeaters of a little later era had little chime steel rods that looked like clock gongs almost, and they would strike and have a nice tone. This would actually just hit on the edge of the case and have a thump, thump, thump. So you could actually feel the watch in your pocket, and you could know what time it was. You push it, and you could feel it. You wouldn't necessarily have to hear it. And I would assume that George Washington's time that would come in real handy when you're out on the field of battle. So. It all looks complete. It looks pretty good shape. If we could repair that center portion, I'm sure this could be in running condition. I do not see a serial number. So this dial obviously was for this watch. But it's real interesting to note that they actually have a maker, HM, which I think we can probably locate. Okay, I guess I'll put this
Any idea on manufacturer, where? I know there's a new Chanel mark on the case.
Yeah, it's Swiss. I'm 99% sure, or it could even be French. The French had these round regulators, but also the Swiss did them early on too, so it's either French or Swiss. And you said it had a Swiss hallmark, so
yeah,
I would assume it's a Swiss make. You can tell by the round balance cock. English would have the one with the flip on the back. Actually, the repeater mechanism itself does operate. I did check that a minute ago. And the bird is not broken. You can actually see the balance wheel turns. I would assume if we put a little power to it, it would run, but we don't want to do that without necessarily necessary precautions.
The second of George Washington's watches is a watch that he acquired sometime around 1775. In 1777, he gave it as a gift to his friend Colonel Thomas Johnson under his command at the Battle of Trenton. This was a very simple, Swiss-made watch with very few markings. We have been attempting to identify the maker, but have had no luck so far. It is on loan from the New York Historical Society.
This was actually, this type movement was really state-of-the-art at that time period. If you notice how thin this watch is, I know by today's standards it's not, but if you look how thin it is, I don't know what that is, but it's not very much, as compared to the one you just saw, which is at least 3 or 4 times as thick. From the verge movement to this was a huge, huge improvement, and this could only be afforded to the very wealthiest of people at the time. All right, what do we have? That appears to be original hand for sure. That one. I would think they both could be original hands. It's certainly period hands anyway, so that's the correct style. All right, now let's take a look and see how we get into this case. It's hinged. Problem I see right off, the little square to set the hands is broken off. So there'll be no way to set the hands. Is that Leroy?
Yeah.
Cool. Leroy.
Watch there.
Yeah. Is that Pierre?
Julian.
Julian.
Julian, I think.
Julian, yeah, the father.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, he made some wonderful things. All right, we'll see what kind of movement it is. The cylinder, you think? Ruby cylinder?
Take your.
I would think.
Fly
I would
over
think
here.
this could be a jeweled cylinder. Find out. There's a little button on the side, right here. You'll notice that you push, and that releases this latch, and you can get into the inside of the movement. And we have a cylinder, which I thought, because Gallet was famous for that. Here's your movement. And it's quite an incredible piece. Here's your mainspring barrel with your stop works right here. Can't really see it that good. Let me see if I can get a better picture of the escape. Well, at least you can see the cylinder teeth right here. Down there is the cylinder teeth. It is out of, well, it's out of action for some particular reason. It all looks intact. Hairspring, everything looks pretty good. There's hardly any rust. In fact, I don't think this has been open too awful many times in the last couple hundred years.
Those are base screws on the outside, or are they for?
Yeah. These springs are just to lift cases
These are the lift,
for the dust cover Corvette. Which is a case number, doesn't pertain to the movement. Very nice. You don't see, these are fairly rare. You don't see this movement this early, this thin.
The next case in the Founding Fathers Gallery is composed of 3 watches and a clock from President John Adams, Thomas Jefferson, and James Monroe. This pocket watch was owned by President John Adams. It is assumed that it was acquired while he was in Paris. Unfortunately, through the years of ownership changes in the Adams family, the watch was altered quite a bit. The movement, the hands, and the case are not original to the dial, so it has had a lot of life after John Adams owned it.
I would assume by the size it's a fusee. It's probably French or Swiss because it's got the winding through the dial. The hands, yeah, obviously this one's bent. I think it might have been soldered at one point right here. It's hard to tell. I don't know. You know, without taking the hands off and examining them closer, it would be difficult to say. If I had to guess, I'd say they're both replacements, although they've been replacement years ago. I mean, these are not new hands, but I would say 1890s or so, turn of the century, if I had to guess, replacement hands. Although they are, you know, a matched set, which is...
Why did they make it different color like that?
Well, I think this is tarnished. I would assume if we polish this all up, it would probably be gold on all of them. This might even be painted down to here. I'm just not sure. You know, we don't know until we have to do it. But this is a repeater. I assume it's a quarter repeater. Let's look at the inside and see what we have. We have, I'm not sure what we have under here yet, but we'll find out in a minute. It appears to be a lever, which would be an extremely early lever if that's what this is. Okay. Not so good news, I don't think, for this one.
What we expected.
This is a what age was this supposed to be?
Well, the watch, the shell of the watch is supposed to be, I think 1780s or 90s.
Yeah, this is totally not.
But we figured, general consensus was that the movement problem.
Oh, there's no question the movement is. For one, the split balance was not even invented at that particular time. This is a compensating balance. The lever escapement, I think, was just coming in. I don't know when it came in, but the finish is way beyond what you'd ever see. So this has actually been replaced in the movement in this, which is the same. Yeah, no, this is probably a. If I had to guess, I'd say maybe 1900 movement in it. Somewhere around there. They actually held alarms and stuff on this, or it could have been a jewel that was set in the back of the case at one point. But I've seen old ones that would hold bells for repeaters. Originally, it could have very well had a repeater bell on it.
This pocket watch was acquired by Thomas Jefferson while in Paris, France. It was made by Daniel Vaucher, a Parisian watchmaker. It is missing its outer case as well as its crystal, but otherwise still in very good shape. The watch was eventually given to President James Monroe as a gift by Thomas Jefferson and is currently in possession of the James Monroe Museum in Fredericksburg, Virginia.
Okay, this does not have a crystal. It does have, or it did have, at one time, it was built for a calendar, the date, inner dial there. Here again, it's either Swiss or French because of the winding through the dial.
So there's missing a hand?
It is missing a hand, yeah. Well, I don't know. There's no way to know. It's actually missing a wheel. Now, whether it appears that the hour and the minute hand are on there. Now, it's missing the hour hand, but there's no post for it, so that means the hour wheel is not in there either.
Okay.
So that's why there's no hour hand, there's no hour post. This actually originally would have had a little button here on the side. We would push that. There's the case, and then we have a little latch on the bottom. Open this up. See a nice early movement. That maker does ring a bell.
Wache, yeah.
Yeah, I believe he was a pretty famous high-grade maker back in the day.
President James Monroe purchased this clock while in Paris in the 1790s. It's a very typical drum form clock, but it's missing its original movement. It's in very good condition and sits on its original mantelpiece in the James Monroe Museum in Fredericksburg, Virginia. This watch was passed to James Monroe through a relative of his sometime in the 1750s. Of all the watches on exhibit, this one is probably in the finest condition and could work very well if wound up. We think it's a Swiss or French movement watch with an English stamp of Gabriel of London. We have done some nice videos of this watch as well.
It would be. This is probably, oh, I've seen this type. I would think this would be maybe 1830s and 40s is one of the most popular, maybe 50s, but
1730s or 17?
Or 7,
Okay.
Yeah, 1730s, I'm sorry. It looks really good and original. I don't know about the crystal, possibly, but the hands appear to be right. The case, whenever you see a watch like this, you look at the overall condition, and if everything looks right, the chances are that it is. I mean, this has the look of an untouched watch. Crystal, it's been taken care of. The hands are there. The dial is not marked up too much. It appears to be in really nice condition. I'm sure this is a solid gold case. They usually made these this reposé were probably 18 or 20 karat. They really had a high gold content. Anyway, it's a pear case. We took the back off. We have the inner cases where you wind it. Let's take a look at the a little latch at the 12, and you just push up on this little latch and the whole movement hinges out. And we have another vertical movement here. London. G-A-B-R-I-E-L. There's your fusee, here's your chain. It appears to be, and another good sign is if the watch was in running condition and just ran down and was never wound, this is what you'd see. The chain is wound around the barrel, it's just run down. So the staff looks good. So I wouldn't be surprised that this was a well taken care of watch. Doesn't appear to be any rust. Very nice.
You had said something about putting paper in there.
Yeah, I would actually put some sort of, normally what you have on your cases, when it's a pear case, is you'd want to put a watch paper in between. It just keeps the back from scratching up and marring it up. Watch papers were an advertisement, basically, of the watchmaker. In fact, Drew, one of my students now, has some made up here.
This clock belonged to President James K. Polk and was purchased after he retired to his home in Tennessee. It was acquired because it was reminiscent of some of the clocks that he had seen in the White House. This clock was acquired for President James Buchanan for use in his home in Lancaster, Pennsylvania. It was never used in the White House itself, but it was the clock that chimed all the hours for Buchanan while he was at home. The dial was custom painted for Buchanan, as well as the images of wheat in the corners of the dial, attributed to the name Wheatland, James Buchanan's home here in Lancaster, Pennsylvania. This clock, while it was never owned by Abraham Lincoln, was in the War Department office during the Civil War. Since Abraham Lincoln spent every day of the war in office, he most likely saw this clock more than anyone else in the White House during his tenure. There's no question that when this clock was running, President Lincoln was in the room paying attention to it during the war years. This E. Howard & Company pocket watch was given to President Rutherford B. Hayes in 1856 by his mother-in-law. It is a beautiful watch and has an early serial number for Howard Watch Company. On the inside of the front cover, there is a picture of President Hayes' wife, Maria, as a reminder of their love.
Gold Howard. He has his, I assume that's his wife?
Yes, that's Red Web Hayes.
Howard was one of the top makers in the early 1860, 70, 80. This one, the hinge, has actually, it isn't broken, it's just come off. You can see the actual solder right here. The pin is complete, nothing's broken, it just separated from the case right here. However, that's not the correct type solder to be on, so anyway, that's probably what it came off. Now, I know all the Howard collectors will know in an instant what this watch is. I have to frankly admit I'm not a Howard. Without my book, I couldn't tell you what model this is. But I do know that it has the patented Gershons, I believe it is, patent. And the regulator is pretty unusual. You can see how it's regulated here. Here's your pins. Here's your rack and pinion. This goes around the center post, and this is how you regulate it from down here. So it's a unique thing. Here's your Swiss Geneva works, or actually stock works. Howard was a maker.
How long did he use it? How long did he use that watch?
No, I don't know. But these are solid gold brown screws. This is a quality watch for today. I remember Howard, he said that any high-grade watch didn't need more than 15 jewels. And actually this one has 15 jewels. From what I can tell, there's no jewels here, here, where the train is jeweled and the escapement, and that's it. This, by the way, is an original Howard case. It's 18 karat. If I remember my history right, and boy, if I don't have it right, I know we'll hear about it. But especially from the Howard guys.
There you go.
But if I remember, the original cases were all 18.
This French-produced mantel clock is from President James A. Garfield's home in Ohio. It's a very straightforward mantel clock. You'll see numerous examples of this kind of clock here in the museum, but this one is actually pictured in photographs of President Garfield's home. This is a clock owned by President Chester A. Arthur. It's a very interesting clock on loan from the New York Historical Society. In the process of studying this clock, we were able to identify the movement maker and also determined that the casework on this clock is unique in that it was very likely it was custom made for President Chester A. Arthur. This is Grover Cleveland's French mantel clock. This clock is on loan to us by our friends at the Hoffman Clock Museum in Newark, New York. This clock was actually mentioned in one of the NAWCC Bulletin articles as part of the collection at the Hoffman Clock Museum. It is probably the heaviest of the presidential exhibit, so we put it in its own case to support the weight. This clock, while perhaps not the fanciest clock in the exhibit, is a wonderfully significant clock to the presidency of Theodore Roosevelt. Shortly after the assassination of William McKinley in Buffalo, New York, this clock was on the mantelpiece in the private home where Theodore Roosevelt took the oath of office. You'll see that the hands are stopped at 3:33 in the afternoon, which is when Roosevelt took the oath of office. Since that day forward, this clock has never been wound. This is a pocket watch that was owned by Warren G. Harding. You'll notice the front of the watch has a variety of Masonic emblems on it. This was a watch that was produced by the Hiram Watch Company and was retailed at Macy's. There's at least one or two others that have come up at auction. This one, however, was the one that we know President Harding carried in his pocket on a regular basis.
Now, what period was this? What time period was this? 1920s? 1920s? Yeah, the Masonic was extremely. I'll just show you all the neat stuff on this case. This case is where it is with this watch. It really is a one of a kind. I mean, the watch is a one of a kind, but the case is really spectacular.
Just had a standard wristwatch movement, right? saying a Swiss wristwatch.
Yeah,
This wristwatch was acquired by Franklin D. Roosevelt's son-in-law as a Christmas present in 1944. It was then given to Franklin Roosevelt, and he wore it for the last couple of months of his life. It is also believed that he wore it at the Malta Conference in January 1945. This is a beautiful Tiffany watch that is on loan to us by an NAWCC member.
of the historical collection we have here. Mechanically, let me bring this up so we get a little better picture here. This is a minute repeater, a skeletonized minute repeater of the finest quality. Beautiful rose engine turning. FDR.
Did you look at the image?
Yeah. And it's the engraving in the back. The crystal is actually what has the painting. So you break that, you're in trouble. It's actually reverse painting, I
Is that
think.
reverse?
I'm going to look at it and see here a little closer. Sure. It looks to me like it is reverse painting on this crystal. Let me get a real close look and maybe we can actually determine that, but I'm almost sure it is. There's no way that this is being held otherwise. If you look all the way around the edge, it's not.
Oh, for the industry.
In here, yeah. Even the numbers, I thought might have
bars
been.
for the chapter ring? Or the
Yeah, this whole numeral is
all
also.
painted.
Yeah. At least I cannot see anything holding anything up. So I mean, it's in a complete line around here without anything. So I think that's the case, which is pretty incredible. You have here's your minute rack, your quarter rack. It's just a beautiful piece. Let's take a look at the other side. Repetition minutes, minute repeater. 33 joules. Needs a compensating balance, basically, and a great hairspring.
33 joules.
Yeah. This one you have, it's jeweled through the hammer. Here. Actually, it's not jeweled on this one. But anyway, you have jewels all the way through here. Cap jewels.
Yeah.
Wolf winding teeth. The best you can get. Beautiful movie. Gold balance screws.
This clock was given to Franklin Roosevelt by an admirer from New York City. It is made out of sterling silver, it's gold-plated and has 2 watch movements that keep time on the east and west coast. This is a wonderful clock given to Roosevelt in 1939. It was also featured on the cover of NAWCC Bulletin. This pocket watch is a Swiss-manufactured minute repeater. The Minister of Education for Cuba gave it to Theodore Roosevelt as a birthday present in 1942. This is a beautiful movement and has a wonderful sound when it chimes. It really is one of the top-notch watches in the exhibit in terms of mechanics. This is a Gallet Flying Officer Chronograph wristwatch that was acquired by Harry S. Truman in 1939. Gallet Wristwatch Company received a contract from the government to produce these watches for the U.S. Army Air Corps. At the time, Senator Truman was on the committee that approved it and as a result received this watch. We have a wonderful photograph of Harry Truman wearing this watch and pointing at it while laughing. Hopefully he was laughing at it because he liked it, not because it wasn't telling time.
Yeah, we have pictures of the inside of this.
Yeah.
This is a really difficult case to get apart, and I don't think, since we have the picture, we're not going to do it. It's a basic movement I remember from last time.
Right.
But that's something to have students put together a watch like this. It's pretty impressive.
Really high grade watch. Nice.
Yeah, it's a basic.
Many folks don't realize that a number of our presidents were horologists by nature, if not by study. Harry Truman was no exception. Since he loved to collect clocks and watches, his staff acquired this Kalex World Time Clock as a Christmas present in 1950. This leather-bound case houses a brass dial that shows times throughout the world. This desk clock is on loan from the Harry Truman Library. These are some Eisenhower objects that are on loan to us from the Eisenhower Farm in Gettysburg, Pennsylvania. This is a small table clock that was located in Eisenhower's study. It has 4 faces on it, one of them being a timepiece. First Lady Mamie Eisenhower rested her wristwatch and other jewelry on this pink pillow at her home in Gettysburg, Pennsylvania. We felt the watch needed to be shown in the way it was depicted in the house with Mamie Eisenhower's pearls and her famous pink. We thought this would be a wonderful way to exhibit this watch. This is an assortment of timepieces and information associated with Lyndon B. Johnson's presidency. The first is a Tiffany & Company 18-karat gold wristwatch. Even today, this watch is one of the finest mechanical watches ever made. The LBJ Library has offered this watch to the museum on a long-time loan and will be featured again in 2010 as part of our Art of the Watchmaker exhibit.
Texas. The daily wear.
Yeah, a Cricket is an alarm watch for those who don't know it. You pull this out, turn this hand to where you want it to go off in the alarm, and then push this back in, and then the alarm strikes on, there's a post that's connected to the center here, and it would strike on it and it would vibrate the whole back of the case, and it would make your sound. Usually these watches, I'm not going to take the back off of this one, but sometimes they have actually 2 backs. That one is actually put on the other for sound. There's a little plate underneath it that vibrates and gives you more sound. I believe that's why you have your holes here. That actually is hollow there, and it kind of resonates.
That makes sense.
This watch is Lyndon Johnson's Vulcan Cricket alarm watch. We wanted this watch for the exhibit because it was his daily wear, the watch he wore on a daily basis. Often you'll hear Rolex watches associated with Lyndon Johnson's presidency, but the Vulcan Cricket was the watch he wore most often. You can actually see that through the kink that's in the band connected to the watch. Vulcan Crickets are still made today by the Vulcan Watch Company and are still presented to U.S. presidents.
Pretty, huh? This has been, this particular movement, last time we had this open, is many people, and I am one of them, agree that it is probably the best wristwatch model watch ever made for automatic. It's got a solid gold rotor in it. It's just beautiful. It's precision as you can get. It's just beautiful watch. That's perfection there. This was made, did you look that up?
1953?
Yeah, I think when people ask me when the watchmaking hit its absolute top precision, I'd say 55. That's what's my standard. Middle 50s, early 50s. They made parts that are just beautiful. I mean, every part is polished to a black mirror finish. Everything fits absolutely precise. I mean, there is nothing that is not precise on this. Really spectacular.
Did you wind that up?
18 karat. No, this is running
okay.
just from the
just
from the weight of
just
moving.
From the moving. Okay.
Just from the moving. Yeah.
Wow.
See, if you just tilt it back and forth, you have your 2 ratchets. That turns, and that turns this wheel, which actually will wind it up. You have your damascening on the 18 karat gold rotor. But this rack, this system is just so nice. for automatics. It's just so easy. I think you get more whine per per inch of the rotor moving than in any other model. It just really works really well. You can see how free that is. And your escapement, if you can see that pallet down there, that has an absolute mirror finish.
The LBJ library has 2 of these watches.
You can see what's called a black polish. You see how this is so shiny that it looks black? That's actually what a black polish is. It's just, it reflects so well and it's so shiny that when you hear a black polish, that's what it is. That's what they're talking about, a black polish. And that's with everything, with every screw, with every spring. Anything steel in this watch is pretty much that way. All the pivots. So that's why, you know, all that takes time, and it takes lots of time, because you do that by hand. You don't do that any other way. Look at that kind of finish on the stuff. So a lot of this is all hand finished, and that's why this is, why it's one of the top quality watches ever made. It's beautiful. Just the heat, cold, and the sochronism. Sochronism, by the way, is the watch is keeping time now when it's on a full wind or when it's on a little bit of wind. If the watch is wound up a little bit, your balance wheel takes shorter arcs. But since it's running slower, it takes the same amount of time as if the balance wheel is taking higher arcs at a faster rate of speed. And that's the sochronism is that the running different speeds keeps the same amount of time. So that's what the sochronism is. 30 joules. Real nice. And then your back will say, you'll have your case number, your hallmarks, 18 karat. That's what the paddocks back look like. This is the Swiss hallmark for 18 karat solid gold. It's a lady's head looking to the left.
What's nice about these watches, you saw both of the LBJ watches, is the accession numbers start with 71. These are watches that were given to the library by LBJ. So he gave them to him shortly after he left. That's as I had to break the news to a number of people about a number of things.
President Johnson was also very fond of giving away watches as mementos when people came to visit him at the White House. The watch you see here is a Hamilton wristwatch with LBJ's initials on the dial, as well as his motto, "Do unto others." This watch is on loan to us by the NAWCC member. What's wonderful about this little collection of objects is that the timepieces are on loan by Julie Nixon Eisenhower, President Nixon's daughter. The clock you see here was given to Richard Nixon by a good friend and Major League Baseball star, Don Baylor. Baylor and Nixon founded a charity together, and according to Ms. Eisenhower, this clock was his most treasured possession up until the day he died. This wristwatch was given to Julie Nixon Eisenhower by President Dwight Eisenhower. President Eisenhower always wore a Hamilton wristwatch with images of his grandchildren on the dial. Since Julie Nixon Eisenhower always admired this particular watch, President Eisenhower had this watch made specifically for her when she became engaged to his son David. She loaned this watch to the museum, but has since given it to us for our permanent collection. One of the fascinating things about putting this exhibit together was the research that went into each of the objects. As mentioned in the beginning, many of these objects are never seen by the public. Many of them are locked away or seen as insignificant compared to the other presidential artifacts. One of the things we did was look for images of presidents using the timepieces that we have on exhibit. The picture you see here is a picture of Gerald Ford's Oval Office, and in the bottom left-hand corner of the image, you'll see a small brass desk clock. Through research done by one of our interns, we were able to locate the picture showing our clock being used by Ford during his presidency. One of the things we try to do in this exhibit is to present these objects in the context of the time frame in which they were used. The walking stick you see here on the right was presented to Simon Willard by Thomas Jefferson in honor of the patent of his banjo clock. Jefferson, of course, was a known horologist and enjoyed the study of time. The walking stick on the left was attributed to Franklin D. Roosevelt and is on loan to us by an NAWCC member. The Time in Office Presidential Timepieces exhibit is the first in exhibit schedule, which is fairly ambitious here at the National Watch and Clock Museum. Through partnerships with other museums, we hope to bring some of the finest timepieces available to our members to view here at the museum. We also hope to make exhibits that are of interest to the general public to attract as many people as possible to our hobby and our mission of preservation and education regarding the history of time and timekeeping. I'd like to thank you for taking the time to experience this exhibit with us through this medium, and I hope to see you here at the National Watch and Clock Museum sometime in the near future.